Wow, our next guest is so perfect for this show, and he's so wonderful what he does for veterans. He's truly a veteran advocate. His book that we're talking about, The Veteran Next Door, Stories from World War II, Volume 1, 1939 to 1946. His name is Randall Baxter, and he joins us on America Tonight with me, Kate Delaney. Randall, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Kate. I've been hoping to just meet your listeners.
Yeah, and so what's so interesting is about putting this book together. Tell the listeners about the road to doing this because you created a radio show where you shared stories of these veterans.
Right. And, I never intended to write a book. Um, I was just involved and a lot of my friends were radio guest hosts already, and I was just talking to them. I said, you'd have a great Saturday morning show if you would do uh, tell stories about veterans in the past. And they looked at me and they said, "What do you mean?" And I told them what I thought. And we went to lunch, and I said, "This would be a great idea. All you need is a host and somebody to do it." And they looked at me and said, "No, no, no, you're going to be the host." So uh, that's what started it. And originally, I made so many mistakes when I got started, but I realized that my clients, I'm sorry, my listeners wanted to hear these stories, and the World War II veterans never had a chance to tell them. And I heard Ronald Reagan one time give a speech when he was at Point de Hoc, when he was the president, and he was telling the American World War II veterans that it was time to tell your story because they were all passing away, and um, that's just what I did.
Wow, and you really told the stories. I mean, we're talking about what were we saying off the air in our fabulous conversation? 600 hours.
Yes. Well, and that included the Vietnam War. I've written a book called Vietnam on the Outside Looking In too, and that's it includes the Iraq War and the Afghan War, and I even had Civil War experts come in, Revolutionary War. I even had an actor come in, and I did an interview with Thomas Jefferson on July 4th, so that people would understand about the Declaration of Independence. So eventually, I just found, I had to learn how to talk to veterans. And it's just funny, and I don't. But one of my first veterans was captured on the first day of the Battle of the Bulge, and when I went to meet him, he was on his deathbed in his living room,
Wow.
and I couldn't. I didn't know how to communicate with him, and so I was asking him questions, and he didn't know how to respond. And I said, John, can I come back in a week? And I went back, and I went to the library, and I read about the Battle of the Bulge, and I read about what happened to the guys who got captured. And I went back that next week, and I said, John, I have a question for you. And he said, "What's that?" And I looked at him and I said, "Can you tell me about those barns?" And he looked at me, and he was laying down, and he raised up on his left arm, and his left arm started shaking. And this is exactly what he said: "How'd you know about them barns?" And he went into a 2 hour description of what happened to him almost every day. But you can talk to a veteran, but if you ask them to tell you a story, they won't. But if you ask them about something that happened to them, they'll tell you everything you need to know.
Wow. And you
It's just
really,
in the questions.
yeah, you really pulled it out of them. Tell us some more of the stories. I mean, you have to go get this book. You can get it for a song, paperback, hardcover, Kindle, get it on Amazon, Barnes& Noble. But tell us some more of the stories that you really liked. And I know it's hard to pick them out, but give us some more stories.
Well, there was um, a black man that I knew, and he was a sailor in World War II when the war started, and he sailed out and told me all the ships that he sailed on. And he started out in Greenland, and he wound up on a tower looking down at General MacArthur as he signed the peace agreements.
Wow.
No, I had everybody thinks Audie Murphy won more, was the most decorated hero of World War II. One of the people in my book, I interviewed him, and he had passed away. So I called his wife, and I said, "Miss Connor, I'll buy you dinner anywhere in Kentucky, and I'll come to you." And she said, "Okay, Randy, but I really like turkey sandwiches at Subway." And I said, "Okay." So we went there, and she told me about the story of her husband, Merle Connor, who served with Audie Murphy. And the only thing that he didn't have was the Medal of Honor. And then about 2 years later, I was sitting in my living room and I watched President Trump, and somebody said that he's going to pin the Medal of Honor on somebody, on the wife of a deceased veteran. And I watched it, and there he was hanging that Medal of Honor on Merle Connor's wife.
Wow.
And now nobody realizes it, but Merle Connor is the most decorated soldier of World War II.
Wow.
But nobody's going to go back and cancel Audie Murphy.
Right.
Okay, so and then I had another professor who was a driver on the Red Ball Express. For those of you who don't know what that is, that was our supply line during World War II when we invaded Normandy and the trains were all blown up. Um, you know, I interviewed a B-17 pilot who told me about the first time he ever saw one of the German jets fly up, and one of the German jets flew up and knocked out the B-17 in front of him. So
Oh,
he tells you, and then a little mountain boy in East Tennessee was on the USS Pittsburgh, and a big typhoon hit, and the Pittsburgh broke in half. And he was telling his story. Nobody died, nobody got hurt because the captains and the engineers knew how to save everybody before the ship broke in half. But my favorite is the Battle of Athens. Most people don't know that. The Battle of Athens in 19 was on August coming up. I think it's the first week of August in Athens, Tennessee, where the veterans came home, and and the whole sheriff's office was corrupt, and the sheriff's office was in charge of the election, and the veterans had put in their own party to get rid of the corruption. And at 3 p.m. on the day of the election, the sheriff went and confiscated all the ballot boxes and told everybody he'd let them know who won in the morning. And
wow.
there was 900 shots fired by veterans who had to attack the courthouse. And it was the very first time that a government inside the United States had been overthrown using the Second Amendment.
Wow. And how many people don't even know that story? You're right. It
I'd
gets buried.
say I'd say about 33 million people.
Yeah.
So they're all great stories. And one thing about my book that I like is they tell the complete history of World War II in short story version just by the experiences of each one of these veterans. They've all passed away now, um, except for the girl in the first chapter, which is a 3-year-old Jewish girl that told her story about her parents handing her over to a minister, and her parents got on a train that went to Auschwitz.
What,
So,
what was that
so
like
the,
hearing that story and hearing these stories for you? In a way, what a privilege.
it was a privilege, and sometimes I just think that I finally decided to learn how to talk to them, how to ask them questions, because there's such a wealth of experiences, and a lot of soldiers don't want to talk because they're ashamed of what they did, or what they did was not, you know they just had to deal with it. They came home wounded, and nobody could see the scars.
Mm. Yeah, and
So
certainly they didn't tell the stories. That was exactly what you're saying. And so
they
you,
didn't know how to tell a story.
yeah, you know how to pull it out of them. For
I
you,
was
when
lucky.
people read the book, Veteran Next Door: Stories from World War II, Volume One, what do you hope they take away?
That they may be living next to an American hero. All
Wow.
they have to do is ask and find out. But we watch our news today, and they watch all the drones and everything, and they don't think about the World War II soldier. The average World War II soldier spent about 50 to 60 days in battle. Okay, the average Vietnam soldier spent 365. But but they had different problems. The World War II soldier, when I met them, they were elderly, and they were having problems getting VA benefits. And the way I met them was I was helping them get their VA benefits. And as I was helping them get their benefits, I'd look at them and say, "What'd you do during the war?" And they would tell me who they were, what they did, or what ship they were on. I had one guy in volume two that I have not finished yet, had Alzheimer's. And all he would tell me was that he painted on the side of a ship. And I had a picture of him with that ship number on it. And I researched that ship number. And I looked at his records, and he was in several major landings of U.S. troops on major islands in the Pacific, and he didn't remember. Do we have time for one more quick story?
Yeah.
Okay. I was a guest speaker here in Knoxville, Tennessee, at a center for homeless. And it was Christmas. And I knew one of the guys that was in there, and I knew that I had already written about his father in my book. So I got up and told the story of his father, and I told about the scar on his shoulder where a Japanese sword had hit him. I told him about the wound he had in his left buttock where a Japanese wooden bullet had gone through him, and then I told him about the wound that he had when he stepped off of a boat on the beach, and about 3 seconds later, a grenade went off and shook his stomach and his spleen loose. And at the end of it, when it was finished, the guy that I was trying to reach walked up to me and he said, "Mr. Baxter, I never knew those stories about my father." He said, "I knew he had a scar on his shoulder. I knew he had scars all over his body." But he said, "We never talked about it." And he was there. He passed away too. He was an alcoholic and he was homeless but I just wanted to reach him and I knew he was there. And I just needed him to know the story about his father.
Oh, wow. What a perfect place to end this. Just again, it's just amazing your storytelling abilities and how you treated those veterans and sharing this with the world is something super, super special. And it's special that we had a chance to spend some time with you, Randall. Thank you so much for coming on.
If anybody wants just one chapter to read, they can just send me an email at randallbaxter@randallbaxter.com and ask for it. It's called Superman, and I think they'd love it.
Yeah, I agree.
So, yeah, I appreciate your time. And
yeah, and it's just, again, just pick up the book, everybody. Thank you so much.
okay, thank you.